Good morning, I'm Gemma, the Associate Editor of Stylist magazine. I want to welcome you today to Stylist Question Time at the Women of the World Festival at South Bank. Since Stylist's launch 5 years ago, we have always been interested in politics, not just in an election year. In the past, we have featured female MPs in the magazine, such as Stella Creasy, Chloe Smith, Amber Rudd, Jenny Willett, and most recently, Jo Swinson. We've actually even put David Cameron on the cover, dressed as a vicar. Today, you're here to listen to these key female MPs, and it's your chance to ask questions about the issues that are concerning you about this year's general election. We have here Labor's Harriet Harman, Liberal Democrat Lynne Featherstone, Mary Macleod from the Conservative Party, and Deputy Leader of the Green Party, Amelia Womack. Today's discussion will be chaired by Ritula Shah, presenter of Radio 4's The World Tonight and Saturday PM. Please make the most of this hour. It's going to get feisty, and we're going to love every single moment of it. Enjoy.
Welcome, everybody, to the South Bank. Welcome to the WOW Festival. It's really inspiring to see so many of you here this morning defying the statistics and bucking the trend. Don't you love the idea of bucking a trend? I always imagine kicking some really hideous platform shoe that's really uncomfortable. But anyway, the statistics that I'm talking about have nothing to do with platform shoes. They're about the voting figures. They are extraordinary. Young women aged between 18 and 24 are the sector of the electorate least likely to vote. And in 2010, over 9 million women didn't bother to vote at all. So can we change the numbers in some small way this morning, this time around? Well, we've got a very distinguished panel here this morning of leading female politicians to help us change our mind. Mary Macleod is the Conservative MP for Brentford and Isleworth. She formed the all-party parliamentary group on women in 2010 to encourage more women into politics. She's also keen to see more women on boards, but is against quotas and says, "I firmly believe all candidates should be judged on their merits and performance and not promoted just to a tick box." Lynne Featherstone is the Liberal Democrat MP for Hornsey and Wood Green. She's a minister at the Home Office. On the pay gap, she says women and men should be paid the same if they do the same job. It sounds obvious, but in reality, it doesn't happen. Harriet Harman is the Shadow Deputy Prime Minister and the MP for Camberwell and Peckham. She once introduced herself in the Commons by saying, "I'm delighted to have been asked to talk about equality in Parliament, a subject close to my heart, and one of my central missions over the last 30 years, and one which has earned me nicknames like Harriet Harperson, Howard and Harriet. There are so many who clearly need a stint in the Harriet Harman Institute of Political Correctness." And last but not least, Amelia Womack, who's the Deputy Leader of the Green Party and their parliamentary candidate for, wait for it, Camberwell and Peckham. Have you two met before?
Yeah. It's the first time.
You have a formidable, I think, some formidable competition there. And the Greens are keen to point out that they field more female candidates than any other party. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
We're just going to ask if the House can put the lights up a little bit on the audience so we can see who we're talking to. Is that possible? If it is, we'd be very grateful. Right. Anyway, I'll leave you to worry about that. To carry on. Right. I want to begin by asking each of you, really, how do you persuade women to vote? It's not just 18 to 24-year-old women who are the problem. 39% of them turned out last time. But among 25 to 34-year-olds, just 55% voted. It's a bit better, but not really much better. Harriet Harman.
Well, I think women need a reason to vote, and I think it's a judgment. The fact that 9 million women didn't vote at the last general election is a real judgment on us. And I think it's a problem for our democracy as well, because our democracy's legitimacy is drawn from people voting for it. And if a great swathe of the population is basically saying, well, we don't think you're relevant to our lives, we have no stake in who gets elected, we don't think you understand anything about what's going on in our lives, then actually the legitimacy of Parliament and government, is thrown into question. So I think that we, all of us as women politicians, we've got to make sure that women in this country see that politics has got women in it as well as men. It's not just a men-only business, because I think in this day and age, women are not going to be interested in a load of men telling them what to think and making decisions over their lives. So I think we all have to push ourselves forward. And we have to have women as well as men talking about all the issues that men are concerned about as well as women. That's the economy, the NHS, transport. Those are not men's issues. They are women's and men's issues. And we also have to show that we have got women who are deeply concerned to stand up for women on the question of balancing work and home, tackling the scourge of domestic violence, challenging the unfairness of equal pay. And we have to get in a pink bus and go all around the country and talk about it.
Let's save the pink bus for later. Mary Macleod.
Thank you, and I hate to agree with Harriet, but on this occasion I think I do. It is really important to engage with women, and Parliament has to reflect society that it seeks to represent, so we do need to have the female role models in Parliament. We need many more, so please, any of you out there who really want to think about a political career, do it. I mean, it really is an amazing role to have, where you can change lives, change communities, make the country a better place, but we need more women to come forward and get involved. And I think you have to, as politicians, talk about issues that people care about, because that is what will get them involved in the individual campaigns that we run. And I think it's really important for members of Parliament and other parliamentarians to get into schools, start when people are young, and say, politics may be a dirty word at the moment in this country, but actually most of us here, I mean not all of us here, I believe, are doing it because we want to make a difference to our communities, make a difference to the country. And therefore, it's really important that we go out and tell our story, tell some of the things that we're doing. In one of my schools in Chiswick, I did a session on domestic violence and sexual violence and conflict. And because I talked about, forced marriage, female genital mutilation, boys and girls were really involved in the discussion, asked brilliant questions. So I think if we take them the issues, then that is more likely to be things that they'll engage in, rather than just the typical old-fashioned fighting one against another on a party political basis.
Harriet and Mary have both spoken about the importance of representation. Lynne Featherstone, there aren't many Lib Dem female MPs.
Sadly.
No.
Very sadly.
So, I mean...
Well, everyone always says that to the Lib Dems, but we have over 50% of our membership are women. We have 100% of our MEPs are women. We only have one MEP, and she is female. The leader on the London Assembly is female. Leader in Wales is female. But MPs is difficult. Listen, if we were going to get a swing of 100 extra seats, 100 extra Lib Dem MPs, we would have lots of women. There's no real issue in the party other than it's really hard to win seats if you're a Liberal Democrat. We don't have those natural kind of constituencies, so we have to work at grassroots level. And locally, I'm the MP, my campaign chair is female, the leader of the council group is female, so there's nothing institutionally wrong in terms of the Liberal Democrats. But the wider question, I think it's incredibly important to have women making decisions. And I always say when I go into schools a lot, get to places where you can make decisions. Get your hands on the budgets. I remember I was on the London Assembly, and I was chair of transport in London, and you could see, the decisions that were made, the sort of budgets that went to infrastructure, like who's got the longest train or who's got the biggest airport. That was kind of, not to be sexist about it, but that was where boys' interests were laying. And yet the routes, the routes from home to school, home to work, domestic routes were less attended to. Now, I think both genders need to do both. I don't think it's as simple as one to one and one to the other. But if you're not there raising the issues that are particular to your gender, they can and do get overlooked. And I think that's really important. And lastly, I think the behaviour in the House of Commons is appalling. And I think that... I just think if that's our window, Prime Minister's questions, then we are all in trouble. So women, come to the House of Commons and make a difference.
Well, Amelia Womack, you're clearly planning on having a go. You're younger, I think it would be fair to say, than the rest of us here, without wishing to be rude. How do you think you get more women engaged in politics and more women willing to get involved, as you have?
I think one of the most important elements is getting representation, because inspiration goes such a long way. I know that I wouldn't be sat here today if I hadn't been inspired by Shah running as mayoral candidate when she was also a young woman. And through that representation, we can make sure that we're getting our voices heard. Often the Green Party is called a party of women. Obviously, we've got Natalie Bennett as our leader. 100% of our MPs are also women. 2/3 of our MEPs and our only Lord is also a woman, and 50% of our London Assembly members. And this has made such a difference, I think, in just inspiring more women to get involved in politics, more women to get involved with the party, and help towards we've got nearly 40% women standing in the next general election. But most importantly, it's not just women standing to fill a quota, it's women standing in winnable seats. It's even our target wards have the majority of women in. So we're not just, sometimes when there are pushes towards 50%, it'll be women standing in places that actually they then don't get into Parliament, and you don't move towards a Parliament that represents society. Because a 50-50 Parliament is what would represent society. And I'm going to do a very quick plug, because if you could stand up, sign the petition for this campaign. We've got some women at the front wearing these T-shirts as well. We need to be discussing why there aren't 50% women in Parliament. We need to be making sure that we're breaking the barriers to women getting involved in Parliament.
It's definitely something we're going to talk about this morning. On the question, though, of representation, great. You're all obviously committed to seeing more women in politics, more women in Parliament. But the reality is rather different. The World Economic Forum's been running a gender survey, I think, for the past 9 years. And the UK, in that time, has been going down the rankings for gender equality. So it's dropped from 18th to 26th place overall. And in specific categories, it's gone down in health from 63rd to 94th. And from 12th to 33rd in a category called political empowerment. Lynne Featherstone, you're not doing very well. If you're in Parliament and you've got your levers on power, the equality of women in this country, people in this country, is getting worse, not better.
Well, I think that's a really important point, because we went first to Parliament and representation, but actually the truth is across most industries, men are still at the top. There still is a glass ceiling. Now, I think we have made advances. I mean, the women on boards issue, for example, where we started in 2010, there were no women on 21 of the FTSE 100 boards. They now have representation. It's gone from 12.5% to 23%. It's a start, but what gets me about it, and where the real challenge lies, is that we know that firms that have equality on boards do much better. Sorry, you're about to interrupt me.
I'm going to bring Mary in, because this morning, I think Germany's going to have a vote today, I think, to introduce a mandatory 30% minimum of women on boards, to make that a statutory policy in Germany. It's something that you're not keen on.
Well, I think, why should it be 30? Why shouldn't it be 50? We've got great women in this country, and I want them to take the best roles, achieve their potential, achieve the goals that they want to. So therefore, I don't want to put barriers in their way whatsoever. I think we do have to be realistic about it and have a plan to resolve it, and that's what certainly...
Well, so why not quotas? Why not go for absolute numbers?
Because, certainly it depends what sector you're talking about. I'm not for quotas, because I think we absolutely can do it and make progress without quotas. Most businesses are pretty against quotas. And I've just come from an International Women's Day celebration in the Guildhall for women who work in the city, and it was just so inspiring. 500 women in a room, 3 great examples on stage, one a teacher, one a businesswoman, and one who runs a social enterprise, chaired by Gabby Logan. It was just really, inspiring to hear their stories of what they'd done, the good, the bad, the challenges, because, we will face some of those, but, we can absolutely get there, and we are making progress, but yeah, I'd love it to be faster.
And why do you think we're going down the gender equality rankings?
Well, I think changes are happening, but I think what we have to do is make sure looking at across all our sectors and see if we're increasing the awareness and visibility of this as an issue, if we're looking for ways to promote our women and show them as role models, really make it transparent. Like what we've done in business is create a Think Act report where we're trying to get businesses to sign up, and 250 have signed up, to making it transparent on what they're doing on this, so that you can actually show the ones who are doing really well and then show the ones who are really bad at this.
But, I think we have to start much, much earlier. I think there's a lot of sexism and over-genderizing, or whatever the word is. Right from the start, when you go to school, girls and boys are treated differently. And I think there becomes a division very early on. And when you give careers advice, and when you do all of those things, which, if you go off into one direction, you're going to be in low-paid work all your life. If you go in another, so it's about ambition, it's about saying you can be anything you want to be, and starting really early on, because that kind of sexism is so entrenched in our society, it's unbelievable.
Harriet Harman with the pink bus.
Well, in a way, there's a one level at which I don't disagree with anything that Mary said. She's obviously right. It's good for business. It's all the arguments on the side of equality. It's sensible. But actually, we have to recognise that, I just am fed up with us being right and not actually getting there fast enough. We're going at a flipping snail's... We're going at a snail's pace. How long have we had a situation where boards are male-dominated, but actually the people working in a company might well overwhelmingly be women? And what does that say about the women? Men make the decisions and you do the work. And I think we have to will the means as well as the end.
In 5 years, we've managed to double that, and that's just at board level. I'm more concerned about the executive pipeline for women at every single level within an organisation. But we have managed to double it in 5 years. So I think you can make progress if you actually have a strategy and plan in place to deliver it.
But I think the progress has been woefully slow. And the other thing is that we have to have mechanisms. I wouldn't be in favour of quotas if there was anything else that worked. But actually, it's not just about women not coming forward. It is not just about women not getting the careers advice or not being ambitious enough or not being confident enough. I think that's blaming the victim. I think the structures obstruct women, and we need to say, OK, we are going to achieve this change. As far as equal pay is concerned, we won't get equal pay at the current rate for another 65 years, at which point I will be 130, and I'm going to be fed up with that.
You'll still be going, Harriet. Still going.
We didn't get women into Parliament without a bloody great row. And the moral of that was, if we hadn't have had the row, we would have still been where we were when I first started in Parliament, which is 3% women. You have to have a row to challenge power structures to make change. It's no good being right.
But you also have leadership. I think... Absolutely.
I don't want to have a row with you, Mary. I want us all to agree. Let's all have a row with them.
I'm happy to have a row, but I also think in terms of leadership, it's not just quotas is the answer. So have the row, yes. But what we did was the Prime Minister, who was then leader of the parties, David Cameron, stood up and said, we need more women to come forward. That came from the very top. We got more women in through it. So we increased our numbers of MPs from 17 to 49. Now, that still isn't good enough. I want there to be more, but we still made that progress. That was without quotas. That was just stretching out to women, encouraging them to get involved and take on an active role in politics.
I want to, Amelia, I will bring you in. I want to go to our first questioner because it absolutely relates to this debate, who should be Anna Duggan. Are you there, Anna? There's some hands gone up the back. Anna's not here then. Okay, go on. A microphone should be with you.
I just want to ask, do you think you have to act like a man in order to succeed in your career? And why can't we close the gender pay gap?
So, Amelia, I'm going to come to you on that. Do you think that actually the way to succeed, if we don't have quotas necessarily, if the structures perhaps get in the way, you've just got to get your shoulder pads on and act like a man?
I think this is why events like this are important, is celebrating the fact that women do have different issues and women do act differently. The fact that it's women who've been hit by austerity the worst, taking the brunt of the cuts, that it's women who are being most affected by the cuts to mental health services, and actually celebrating our differences. And I think that I was going to add to the discussion earlier that when you do have quotas, you can see a real change in just giving people opportunities, because also women act a lot differently. And I know that personally, if it hadn't been through the encouragement of other people for me to run in positions that I probably wouldn't have gone for it. I would have taken that step back, and I probably wouldn't have put myself in that situation. And through working, instead of having top down, being told from the leadership we need more women, actually working from the bottom up and recognising people's skills and talents, and encouraging people into politics, and encouraging people to take, or into the workplaces, encouraging people to take make the best out of their skills and abilities in life. When we had a quota system in the European election for BME and female representation, we went out and we found people that we thought would be really fantastic candidates, would be brilliant at the job, but we really looked at making sure that we had female representation and BME representation. And when that election, that internal election happened, we actually just naturally got a 50-50 split on women and BME, because once those people were there, once those people were in front of were there to be elected, there for people to vote for, people wanted to vote for them. People wanted to see that representation. It was just making sure that we had those opportunities there.
Lynne Featherstone, act like a man?
Act like a man. Well, I dress like a man, I do. I do absolutely stick to a dark suit and a white T-shirt, because I'm afraid if you vary your clothes, they become what people comment on, and that is really a terrible indictment of society, quite frankly, but I haven't got time to worry about what people are saying about how I look like, so I avoid it by wearing like a man. But I've never acted like a man, and I think that would be a real mistake. I think that the female argument is as valid, and sometimes it is the same, but you don't have to pretend to be a man. But I don't know if any of you saw Inside the Commons, that series. Well, Jenny Willett, who's one of my Lib Dem colleagues from Cardiff Central, it showed her with her children in the Commons, and the whip's office having to have the children while she goes through the lobbies. Antiquated, doesn't begin to describe it. The hate mail she got afterwards, that she wasn't a good mother, how dare she be in Parliament, all of that kind of things, which makes it really, really tough, because any working mother knows that you are always split for the entire time your children are young between your work and your home life, and you muddle through and you do your best. And the last thing you need when you have gone out there to become a member of Parliament, to become a role model, is like society saying you should be back in the house. So I think, you know, we have a really long way to go, and that was an exemplar of it. On the pay gap, it's 9.4%. It's the lowest it's ever been, but that is 9.4% too much. Funnily enough, in the 20 to 30 bracket, we're now ahead of men on pay by about 1.1%, but after that we tail off. And I and my party are very for publishing pay, making pay audits mandatory. And I've always thought it's really simple. You know, if you have a company and it has a chart with 25,000, 50,000, 100,000 salary, and you had green dots for boys and red dots for girls, I'm careful about the pink now. But if all the girl dots were under 25,000 and all the boy dots were over 100,000, you would not want to work in that company, because you could see the trajectory.
But it's also about if it's the same role that they are doing. And that's where it's not always as simple as that.
Well, it may not be as simple as that, but that's a pretty clear indicator.
That's a clear sign that they need to sort of start recruiting more women at different levels within the organisation. But it's still, what we want to do is say, if you are doing the same role in an organisation as male and female, you should be paid the same.
Of course, but if none of those female dots are at the top, then you know there's no progression.
But there's not quite somebody just doing it by
But it's also a little bit more complicated than that, speaking from personal experience. If you take time off for maternity leave, if you go part-time, your pay will fall behind. Will it ever catch up? That's the experience for many women.
Yes, and I think that's where, as I say, sort of under 40s, it's all right, but it's and that we've made progress there. It's after that, and that's why you have to do it within every level of the organisation, and that's the same where that's why I talk about not just women on boards, it's executive pipeline, and it's the same with pay. You have to look at every single level and say, you know, and everyone's got different skills, and who may be at the same level.
But that's why I think one of the really important things we have done in the coalition is flexible working and shared parental leave, because now employers, because women and men can now choose who takes that parental leave and when they take it, employers are not going to employ someone because they're a young female and they think they may have a baby. And I think the more the genders can share life, then the easier it will get at work.
Although the flexible leave is also quite flexible for how much the employers have to do.
But it's now in law, and it now has to be reasonable, and I would like to push that further. You know, you work in a direction, you don't get everything at once.
Harriet Harman.
Well, I don't think that women should try and be more like men to succeed. I feel all of us are in politics, not to beat the men at their own game, but to change the nature of politics so it actually delivers for women as well as men. And I actually think that it would be good if men could be a bit more like women and do more looking after children, do looking more after older relatives, and actually, because it's the fact that women are doing those things that you were talking about, your colleague, and we were talking about in the world of work. It's the unequal division of labour at the home, in the home. And I know that amongst many young people, there is an absolute intent and commitment now from young men, from boys and young men, that when they have a baby, they will be an equal carer of that baby along with the mother of that baby. And that is a kind of generational intent which is incredibly encouraging. But to allow that to happen, we have to have equal pay, because if the fact is, when he takes time off, the family budget takes an absolute hit, and she earns less than him, and therefore she always ends up taking time off, then the economic structure cements and reinforces the division of labour in the home and denies people the choice of how they together parent their children. So I agree with Lynne about the transparency on equal pay. If you did have each firm, you could see who was paid at the top and who was paid in the middle and who was paid at the bottom. If it turns out all the people at the bottom are women and the few people at the top are all men, it's not just they're doing different jobs. Why are they doing the different jobs? Is it because the men are so much better than the women? I don't think so. It's just the structure which is discriminating against women, not allowing them the opportunities, discriminating against them if they work part-time, and therefore then it would allow the women to say, this firm or this service is structured around discrimination against women, and we need to change that so we can get the dots all changed.
That's in essence what the Think Act report has started to do, because it's 250 companies of the biggest companies have already signed up, and we're pushing to get more.
Yeah, but you see, voluntary. We put in the Equality Act before we left the House of Commons that there should be a period of asking them to do that voluntarily, being transparent, as Lynne says, voluntarily. And if they didn't do it voluntarily, then it should be by law. And the trouble is, the government have said, we're not going to do it by law. And that means that the companies will string the government along, and for ages.
But I'm saying we've started doing this voluntary way of signing up by Think Act report, and the 250 of the biggest companies have signed up to do it. So we want to grow that, because I do think it helps in being transparent. You can make judgments about an organisation in the opportunities that they give to women as you're going through your career, and especially when it comes to pay as well. And so the more we can push those organisations to do that and show that will make a difference to actually delivering in the organisation. Because we know women within an organisation make a huge difference. There's statistics out there, and analysis have been done that say the business performs better if there's diversity, if there's a balance on the board and at every level within that organisation. So we don't need to prove it; it's already proven.
But then why are they so reluctant? Do you think businesses? Why are they reluctant to take those steps?
They like their
those
jobs.
Changes.
I mean, that's where I think there's pressure, and this is where we can jointly have rows about these things in terms of. So the more we talk about it and make it visible and really push them on it, then I think that's how we manage to get the change at the board level. But we want it further down the organisation, not just at board level. And that's where I think it's good when women can work together on these things to make it happen, because it's something that goes right across society, every sector, and we absolutely need to make a difference on it.
Lynne, very briefly.
Well, it was simply to say that the Equality Act, that particular clause, wasn't enacted by the Labour government before you left government. It's still unenacted by the new government.
Yeah, we were going to do it voluntarily and then do it by law, by force.
But you had to give it a few years to see. And it has moved in the right direction, but not fast enough.
We will
as well.
We will need the legal enforcement. We can't just leave it voluntary. But
so
one
micro
micro point. One micro point, which is that you do need to ensure, bearing in mind the division of labour in the home and that women are doing most of the looking after children still because of all what we were talking about in equal pay, childcare is incredibly important, and we are slipping back on childcare at the moment. It's becoming more expensive. Sure Start centres are closed. The child tax credits have been cut. And actually, women, to be able to get on with their work and bring up their children, need the backing of government with proper childcare.
And we've just put through a childcare bill.
Yeah, but that's not right, Harriet. I mean, the coalition has extended free childcare for 2-year-olds, 15 hours. In our manifestos, there's a promise to go further. 3- and 4-year-olds. Childcare has been extended under this government. We need more, and I'm hoping that all of our manifestos, that is the answer, so that there's no escape, that all of our manifestos include more childcare.
Well, 720 Sure Start centres across the country are closing, and I went to one in Swindon yesterday where it's within weeks of closing, a beautiful purpose-built building which could be having what we're proposing, which is 25 hours of free childcare. And actually, it is a part of the welfare state that needs to be there. It's part of our economic infrastructure to have decent childcare, and we still haven't got it. Women are still tearing their hair out. I mean, they were still when we left government, and they sure as hell still are now.
They're not closing in my constituency. I mean, there's lots of different providers for childcare. But there's lots of different providers for childcare, and it is expensive. I'm in London, so it is expensive in London. But you know, we have done tax-free childcare. We've increased the provision for childcare. I would agree there's more to do, but we've absolutely improved.
I mean, can I just bring Amelia in for a minute?
Okay.
I want to move on.
I was going to say, it sounds like a great argument for a universal basic income, but so basically looking at how the child benefits supported people with children, actually everyone receiving a benefit, an income that people can rely on, that would cut the costs of job seekers allowance, the Department of Work and Pensions, that would cut the costs of people of distributing child benefits, and that it would mean that everyone has money, finances to rely on. But I also wanted to bring up the fact that we're talking a lot about employment rights and the fact that people have the ability to take maternity leave and paternity leave. But when I'm talking to young people at the moment who are putting their lives on hold from starting a family and getting married because they're on 0-hour contracts and this is not an option for them, these were employment rights that you're talking about. It's not an option for many people of a generation. And it's great that we're moving towards more equal distribution of it, but what about those people who don't even have that opportunity?
I mean, I'm really proud that in government we've taken the poorest people out of, there's 2 million of the poorest people out of tax altogether. 58% of those are women. And that's absolutely the right thing to do.
I read that
with zero-hour contracts. Some zero-hour contracts work, but some organisations have absolutely taken far too many liberties with them, and those really have to be tackled because there's unfairness in those.
Okay. Vince Cable has moved to ban the. What is it he's banned? Sorry, Vince Cable has changed the 0 hours contract, so he's banned the exclusivity, which is what meant you could only work for one employer or have a 0 contract hour. So you can go and work anywhere now. And that was the
but I know people with 5 0-hour contracts. How is that better? How is that actually protecting employment rights?
There are companies all over, they're not ideal, but some people say that they like 0-hour contracts. I don't really understand. Well,
I think that some people are confusing 0-hour contracts with flexible working, and we can have flexible working with employment rights and with the protection that people need.
A lot of the councils, my own Labour council has 0-hour contracts in Haringey, and I think it would be better if they didn't.
Okay, what I'm going to do is there will be an opportunity later on, I hope, for many of you to put some points. I want to move on for now to our next question, which is from Mina. She's over there on the right. There should be a microphone coming to you.
Hi. With expenses scandals and cash for access, how can we trust any politicians?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
The question was, with the expenses scandal and cash for access, how can we trust any politician? Amelia, I'm going to come to you first, since you're slightly outside of this.
Yeah, obviously Caroline wasn't, it's MP of the Year. So I feel like she's done an incredible job and wasn't involved with this. But we need to tackle transparency in Parliament. We need to be tackling so many institutionalised issues, because I mean, the institutionalised problems in that building, I mean, you obviously know this a lot more than I do. I just think we really need to look at reform. We really need to look at how we interact, that like the way that everyone talks to each other, Prime Minister's question times, everything. It just seems really exclusionary. It really doesn't seem to talk to people, and the expenses scandal is just one step out of that, that people feel that their seats are safe, that people feel like they can get away with so many different issues. And if you bought a toaster and that toaster didn't do the job you expected it to do, you could sue someone under the Trade Subscription Act, probably. The fact that you can't do that with your politicians and you can't actually hold them to account, I find quite disgraceful, really.
Harriet Harman, loss of trust, loss of respect.
Well, I think, there is a really bitter feeling amongst people about politicians not understanding what it's like to struggle with the day-to-day, the weekly, the monthly budgeting, and a real anger about that. And that's why I think a lot of women who don't vote are not bothering to vote. They're angry with the system, and they think, why should I vote? Or else they're just, they just feel really alienated. I mean, I was in a meeting with trainee midwives, mature trainee midwives in a college in Wolverhampton earlier this week. And this woman was saying, I'm lucky, I've got a bursary of £7,000 a year, and I've had to borrow the rest in order to train to be a midwife. And then we see MPs coming on the television saying they can't live on £67,000. And I mean, the thing is that the only way to respond to that bitterness and anger is not only to clean up the system and make sure that it deals effectively with people who transgress the rules, but also get out there so that people can see that politicians are not just there in order to fill our pockets with money. We are there to stand up. We're there as women politicians to stand up for other women, to understand what it's like to be trying to have a normal family life when you've got a child with severe disabilities, and 24/7 you're fighting the education, the housing, the benefits, the health services. We have to be putting ourselves, we have to walk in their shoes and be alongside them. Otherwise it
doesn't feel like that message is getting through.
Well,
we're still having this conversation.
I agree, and that is why we have, in a very kind of flamboyant way, if you like, and symbolise the fact that we're doing it for real, is getting out in our bus and going to shopping parades and outside school gates and to places where women work, and we're just getting out there and really listening. And a lot of women are saying, we appreciate this because we think most of the time politicians are not interested in us, and I think often politicians are don't get out there enough, and that's what we're doing.
Lynne Featherstone, you don't have a bus, but how are you going to get out there and persuade people to trust politicians?
Well, I'm out there all the time and always have been, and I think that's really the sign of all the good MPs who are in the House, and there are a lot of good MPs in the House. They do get out all of the time and communicate. If all you do is go to Parliament and speak in debates or go to committees, there's no connection there with real people. It's about campaigning in my local area. It's about stopping a waste incinerator. It's about, I've just got step-free access for Alexandra Palace Station. That will make a real difference to people's lives. And telling people what I'm doing and asking them what they want me to do. And I think that's how you make it. And it's really interesting because I was there during the expenses scandal. Any of us who were there in 2005 would have been. And it was horrific to live through because you went to people's door and people would say, you stealing from us. It didn't matter whether you were or you weren't. I was one of the Telegraph saints. I hasten to add. But like any walk of life, you will get a range of people. You will get honest people, medium people, dishonest people. So from there. To 5 years later, or when I was published as a Telegraph saint and I went to doors, then my constituents were really proud of me for not being like that, for not having my snout in the trough. So I think your constituents, if you work with them and they see you and they know what you're doing, then you can rebuild that trust.
And I think the job has changed. I mean, I was in business for many years before I got into Parliament in 2010, so it was all very new to me, politics. And I don't think I probably really knew what the job was going to be until I got there, because it's not just about standing up at the green benches, doing speeches, putting legislation through, although that is important. The majority of my time is spent out around my constituency, helping on local campaigns, responding to local issues, seeing people who've got problems, and really trying to improve the local community. And that's where you can make a difference, and you can see it with each individual person that you try and help. And that, to be honest, is much more inspiring, whether you do that at a local level, and you can also then, in some of the work that we get involved in, whether it's up at I doing domestic abuse or other things around the world, you can actually see the difference you're making to people's lives. And that's why most of us have gone into politics. And what we need are more sort of normal, genuine people coming into politics from all different backgrounds. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what your background is. If you care about your country, care about your local community, you want to make a difference, this is a great place to do it.
Let's ask the audience. We've heard quite a bit about visibility of MPs engaging with people, being seen out there. Who thinks then that visibility would be the thing that really improves their trust in politicians? Who would say meeting your MP, seeing your MP out and about would be the critical thing? This is unscientific, I hasten to add. I'd say about a quarter of the room, maybe, yeah, possibly. And who doesn't think that's the thing that would sway them, that would change their mind?
Can I just say, when I go to a pub, which is quite frequently, that's what politics does to you, I will go round and say hello to everyone in the pub and say I'm their MP if they're local, obviously. And people always say, gosh, I never thought MPs would come in the pub and say hello to me, which is ridiculous. But it is about becoming a human being and not something that's separate to other people. Because in the end, I spent 20 years as a designer. I wasn't always a politician. I'm an accidental politician. Came in late to it. Anyway, so I do think contact matters.
Well, there you go. It's about half and half, I'd say there. Right, let's move on to our next question, which touches on some of the things we've talked about, but looks at it from a slightly different angle. Lizzie Pook has a question.
Hi, I'm Lizzie. I'm from Stylist magazine. I just wanted to ask you about something that affects a lot of our readers, which is stress. Stress and mental health and burnout. Flexible working obviously talks a lot about childcare. How can we use flexible working to help women with stress and dealing with mental health? And just wondered what you thought about the fact that 1 in 5 women would describe their stress levels as very, very high.
Mary Macleod.
Yeah, and it is difficult, and it's actually starting at younger levels now. So for my youth counselling services locally in Hounslow, there's a huge waiting list for people wanting youth counselling services. So it's the sort of life we're living in at the moment, and I really just think we have to provide that support for them at every level, and definitely starting at a young age, because if you can solve those issues, then it saves longer term issues. But it's also that when you're talking about sort of stressful lives, flexible working, I still think many organisations aren't doing enough on flexible working yet. Perhaps they say they will do it, but how many people actually get to do it? So the more people at senior levels who are doing it, and others more junior can see them doing it, will, I think, start making a bit more of a difference. But we do have to take account of mental health. I go around all my sort of local community groups, seeing just what provision is there for them. But every situation is different, and everyone is individual. So it's having that sort of flexibility that can solve it, that can sort solutions for every single person and what they need. But I think it's a growing issue, and it's something that we absolutely have to address.
Amelia, Womack, is stress, do you think, a problem for all sections of society?
I think we really need to be tackling mental health issues. That, as I said before, the cuts to mental health services is just disgraceful, and it's women that the amount of I think it was, I've read it recently, that I think it was 74% increase in under 25s women, the women under the age of 25 who have been admitted to A&E because of self-harm due to the impact of the cuts to mental health services. And we need to be making sure that there's support for women, for all sections of society, but also making sure that we reduce those levels of stress. And campaigning for things like a 35-hour week.
It's easy to say we should reduce the levels of stress, but we're all having to get to work, we're all having to look after our children. The problems are the same for everybody. How do you reduce levels of stress?
We really believe in a 35-hour week. A 35-hour working week gives you that, and as well as flexible working, just gives that those extra few hours, just gives you enough time in the day to. I've worked a 35-hour week. It does make such a difference, making sure that flexible working is flexible working with workers' rights. And even things like tackling the pay ratio, companies that have a 1 to 10 pay ratio, so that's the person at the top, doesn't get paid, gets paid 10 times more than the very person at the lower salary. That's been it's shown that people who live in these kind of more equal companies tend to experience less stress in their day-to-day lives.
Harriet Harman, stress and
work. Well, I think it is very, very difficult not to feel stressed if you've got the kind of gnawing insecurity of a 0 hours contract where you don't know when you're going to be working and you don't know how much you're going to be earning. I think that it is very stressful if you're working long hours, you know, even back-to-back shifts, and still you don't have enough money to provide the things that your kids need. So I do think that the minimum wage going up and the living wage going up will make a really massive difference.
Would a 35-hour working week make a difference to people, do you think?
Well, I don't think that we should necessarily, I mean, obviously we've got the working time directive putting a ceiling on hours, but I think that the main thing is that people work all hours if they feel they have to, because the pay is too low. So we need an increase in the minimum wage, and we need the living wage. And I also think that there are many, particularly women working in the public sector, who are vocationally dedicated to what they're doing, whether it's caring for elderly people or nursing in a ward, and who work much longer hours because there's not enough staffing and they feel responsible and therefore they stay on. And that is incredibly stressful and difficult for them to cope with and manage with their families. And I would agree with what Amelia says about mental health services. You know, we are still in relatively early days of more open discussion about mental health and the problems of mental health. And it's kind of coming out in a way that it needs to come out in order to command the resources and the value and the importance that it actually has. I mean, we quite recently had a debate in the House of Commons where a number of MPs said that they themselves had suffered from mental health problems. I mean, that was, I think, incredibly important that happened. And I can't imagine that would have happened even 15 years ago. So we need much more open discussion about mental health. We need better supportive, ready there services. But we also need a system that doesn't grind people down. You know, if you're ground down with worries about childcare, paying the rent, 0 hours, not enough money to make ends meet, then, you know, all the role models you get in the world in Parliament are not going to make any difference if those flipping role models are not pulling their finger out and helping you with your life.
Lynne Featherstone.
Speaking personally, I'm very much in favour of the 35-hour week. No, I think this is a really, really serious issue. I think the stress levels are rising off the scale at the moment. There are just so many demands from so many places, particularly on women, because we have, sadly, still got mostly the dual responsibility. I think we also get stress from all of the internet and email, and you know, turning the computer off is really difficult. There's never, you know, when you go home, you're not free. If you're on a public transport, you're looking at your phone to see if someone wants to get you. And I think it builds and builds and builds, and there's very little time left for the other side of life. And it is that balance that is so important. I have not managed to achieve it myself. But in terms of mental health, one of the things I think is worth saying is Norman Lamb's work as a minister in the health department. Not only parity of esteem for mental health, but also putting money into health. And the Liberal Democrat promise for the future is not just to fully fund what Simon Stevens, who's the head of the NHS, is asking, the 8 billion by 2020, but it's also to put 500 million right now in the first year into mental health services. They are in crisis. They have been throughout time. They have never had the resourcing that physical health has had. And I don't expect there's anyone in this room who has had either themselves or no contact with someone who has a mental health issue. It is massive and it is really important, and I'm really proud that although it's been a Cinderella subject, Liberal Democrats have put it on the front and centre of our manifesto.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left. What I'd like to do, if I may now, is take a few points from around the room and then we'll go through them. Please make points, not speeches. It'd be lovely to hear. That way, as many of you as possible can join in. So I don't know where our people with the microphones are. If you can come to the front, and I will point out there's... Right. So there's... Okay, we'll start on the left. There's 3 people there. We'll quickly take those and then...
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering, when the NHS is in bits, how we can justify spending money on a garden bridge and a fast train service to Birmingham.
Okay, and there's somebody else back there.
Thanks. Is an MP's job description totally unrealistic?
Okay, and there was one more just there as well, and then I'll come to the middle block.
In terms of quota, will it... does anybody believe it'll undermine individuals' confidence? You get a position because of the quota, not because of your capabilities.
Okay, and just to go to the middle block, I can't stick your hands up. There's a lady, 2 or 3 on the end there.
I think we've heard a lot about women in politics, but actually in 2 months tomorrow, you want us to go out and vote. So it is party political. It's about what policies your party are going to do and what values you stand on. And actually, like the fact that domestic service centres and refuges have been closed, the things that happen in Yarlswood, like this is party political. And I think it's just to reiterate kind of like that austerity has had massive impacts on women. So I like the collaboration and talking about like getting women into politics. But like, if you can, maybe in like 2 sentences, why should we go and vote for your party and what are you going to do for women?
And there's a lady there.
Hi. As a former music conservatory student back in the States and current politics student at University of London, I find myself as a woman a minority in those particular industries. So my question is, what policies and pressures will you apply that will help young women to allow themselves to feel safer in these male-dominated industries, physically safer, and as well as wider opportunities? Where are those opportunities going to come from tactile policy
There's one more
issues?
just behind you there, and then I'm going to take 2 from there, and then we'll try and answer them. There's loads of different things there, I know.
If you could please give a prediction for how many women you think are going to turn out to vote in this general election.
Okay. And a couple from this side, and then we'll go through. Any more? Any more? We can stop. There's one at the back on the right there, over there. Is there someone that can get down there? The end of the row on the back. And that'll be the last one. A couple more back.
Hi, thanks. This kind of links into a question someone just asked, but Mary, I grew up in Chiswick, so I grew up in your constituency, and I'm someone who's personally been let down by Hounslow Mental Health Services, or I feel I've been let down. And I just want to know, how do I know that any of you are really going to be taking what all these women here have said today back to your parties and your leaders and convincing them that this needs to be more important? Because I just don't feel represented by any political party at the moment.
Okay, I'm not going to ask you to answer them all, but I'll just quickly recap over some of the points that we had. How do we choose between funding the NHS and a garden bridge? Is the MP's job description realistic? Are quotas really unrealistic? How do they work? Women in the vote. What policies do your parties have, respective parties have, to get women to vote? Issues like Yarlswood came up there are very party political. And what are you going to do to make women feel safer in male-dominated professions? How many women do you think may vote? And a lady there who says she feels quite let down by the mental health services in Chiswick. What are you going to do to really make that situation improve? Mary Macleod, I'll begin with you.
Where do I start? Lots of great issues there. NHS, very, very important. That's why we put another 12 billion into the NHS. I mean, we're all living longer. We're living longer, and also with medical advancements in science, there is more that we need to spend on the NHS, which is why that's very important to do, making sure there's more doctors and nurses as well. So I don't see the NHS as though it's in bits. I think there's always things we can absolutely improve with the NHS. But I look at my local hospital, I've got two, where I really think those nurses and doctors are working really hard. They care about the patients, and that's what it always has to come down to. Yes, they need the funding to support them to do the job that they can, but it's also making I think they are doing an amazing job, and so therefore I don't see it as being in bits. But we do have to make sure we improve the NHS where we can.
As far as then policies for women are concerned, what would you say your party is going to do for women? There's a couple of people there that mentioned they feel austerity has been very bad for women.
The first thing I want to do is girls in STEM. So I speak to businesses across my area in West London where they say they can't get the skills that they need. I really want to encourage more girls to do science, technology, engineering and maths. There are opportunities there, and we really want to show to young women that there are a whole range of things that they can do to achieve their potential. But there are some subjects early on that they need to choose to actually deliver that and get some of those roles.
One more, Mary, and then I want to move around.
I also want to continue helping working women, and I'm also doing pushing for a big campaign on domestic abuse and violence. We've just had 10 million funding from the Home Secretary and 5 million from Boris yesterday, but there is so many of us people who are involved across this country, across London. 2 women a week still get killed. 1 in 4 women experience domestic abuse and violence. I really want us to change that for our generation, also the next generation.
Lynne Featherstone.
Carrying on from there, because someone raised the issue of rape crisis centres. I mean, I have to say they were closing under the last government. 15 new ones have opened. There are 84 sexual assault centres. But when I came into government in 2010, amazingly, David Cameron appointed me as violence against women champion across the world. And it has been my absolute mission because, like you, it is endemic and epidemic across the world, and it all stems from inequality. You know, women, if you have no voice and no choice and no control over your life, then you will be oppressed and worse than oppressed. Here it's 1 in 4 women being experience domestic violence. As you go across the world, you see rape as a weapon of war, acid attacks. Women's position in every country is unequal, and it's still unequal in the UK. And when I got that position, because it's relevant, I looked at all the terrible things that happen to women because of inequality. And female genital mutilation seemed to me just so totemic of, you can get nothing more vulnerable than a girl who is having her external genitalia cut off with no power to stop it. And I made it my mission. I'm working with survivors like Nimco Ali and Layla Hussein, who generally appear at WOW all of the time. And I think over the last 3 years, you will have seen not only that go up as an issue, but the money coming in behind it to support the services right across government. And when you say, what difference do you do? Why do you go into politics? It's to do things like that. It's to actually change the lives and to stop the harm and to make those lives, and particularly women's lives, better, because we do suffer from massive inequality, and there is still a massive way to go.
Harriet Harman.
I think the question, the point from the young woman at the back who said, I'm not represented by, I don't feel I'm represented by any political party, encapsulates quite a lot of all the other questions. And I would just say to you, there are women in the Labour Party who've joined and stood up in the Labour Party to be councillors and MPs because they want the Labour Party to deliver for women. There are women whose real mission is to make sure that we have a fairer and more equal society in which women do get equality and their voices are heard. And the job for us then is to make sure that you know that we are there, that we do see ourselves as the political wing of the women's movement, that actually the women's movement needs politics. It needs people to be elected to get in there and to fight for that change. And I certainly see my mission as what you've actually said is not actually happening. So clearly the job is not yet done. And as to the answer, will more women vote at the next general election? You know, it's a judgment on us. It's our failure if they don't, because we're politicians and we need to inspire that confidence and belief that this is a democracy which will deliver for women as well as for men.
Amelia, you get the last word.
I just wanted to add about the crisis centres that didn't the bedroom tax directly impact women who had panic rooms, and that it meant that they didn't have the safety and security that they needed from panic rooms. I understood that that got completely hit by the bedroom tax, and it meant that the safety of women was compromised as a result of an unfair tax.
Mary Cloud, do you want to clarify? Because I genuinely don't
know. Not on that, because there was a special budget assigned for any special cases on the spare room subsidy, so absolutely not.
Sorry, go on, Karen.
So I'm going to be dashing off from here to Green Party conference, and I want to just highlight that in the Green Party, I'm not actually a leader as such, I'm a spokesperson, because in the Green Party everyone has a voice, that our policy is made by our members, created, discussed, debated, formed, and we use evidence-based policy that is then actually voted on by our membership. And this means that we say no to HS2 because we've actually consulted with our membership. We're now 55,000 strong, and said on the ground, what do we think in terms of HS2, and we voted against it. And it means that everybody has this voice. It means that we represent all kinds of different backgrounds, all kinds of different people, and specifically really strong on women's rights. I'm often asked about why we're targeting young people at the moment. Actually, we're not targeting young people. It's that young people central to our decision-making process. Young people have been a part of our decision-making process. That means that we have policies that are relevant to young people. We're not chasing a vote. We're working at the grassroots. And that means that we're also anti-austerity, that we're hearing voices at conference from people who have been hit by austerity, the impacts that it's had on their lives, whether it's unsustainable working, whether it's the fact that now housing, I mean, one of the biggest issues at the moment is housing, that we're actually, salaries just aren't going up in the same way that rents are specifically in London, and that we have policies that represent these voices.
Quick question, difficult one in a way. NHS versus a garden bridge, if you're agreeing.
Certainly the NHS, I feel, we're discussing a couple of white elephants here.
Can I just say to the lady from Chiswick, if you wanted to come and see me later, I'll do everything I can to help you.
Thank you very much. You can never get through everything. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. Thank you to our panel, Mary Macleod, Lynne, Featherstone, Harriet, Harman, and Amelia.